2, 1. We are recording. Aaron here in Christchurch and
Keith in Sydney. How you doing, Aaron?
I'm doing good. So what were we going to talk, or what are we going to talk about today?
Did you want to talk about labeling?
Let's go with it. And let's give an example.
Absolutely.
You go.
Parent to child?
Parent to child?
Well, one of my favorites is when a parent calls a child a good girl or a good boy.
And why is that your favorite, Keith?
I intuited a problem with it for a long, long time, and I'd literally sit down and try and nut out, because it's just 2 words, you know. But there seemed to be this huge story behind it. What is it?
I've told you this 100 times. No, maybe not 100, but you know, I was in Placemakers.
At least once.
Maybe once. I was in Placemakers. Phoebe's 3. She's carrying a little flower. We're walking across the forecourt. She drops the flower, doesn't know because she's so, oh. Anyway, we get this, excuse me, and this guy with high vis, bloody helmet, bloody the whole thing on, you know, one of the Placemakers guys, has her flower and comes forward and he says, I think this is yours. And he leans forward and she takes it. Oh no, I think he says, this is yours. She takes it and he goes, good girl. And for a week, like, you know, her flower, you picked it up, good on you. Lovely gesture, giving it back, all that sort of stuff. But then how does this mean she's a good girl?
Mm.
And that's what this conversation is about.
Yeah. So a nice example. Good girl, and when my first daughter was due to arrive, I was going hell for leather trying to think about, here's this new life coming into the world. How am I going to relate to this person? And I come up with all these different things, and labeling was one of the things that I wanted to address because I observed it so much. And the good girl one, for example, I knew there's something about this that just made me feel sick. And I didn't know what it was. So I had to sort of tease it out. So good girl. So if I own it, if I turn to a little person and I say, good girl, what is happening in my head? What's happening in my thinking? What is it that I'm communicating in that? So
and if I could just add, and what are you communicating about?
Yeah. So if I tease out the basics, something that she did now makes her good.
Mm-hmm.
Now makes this individual good.
To whom?
To me. So I'm owning this particular one. I've called this little girl a good girl, and I'm thinking, well, what is it that I'm communicating about? So she did something that pleased me.
Yeah. So
now I can say that she's a good person. And that just really churns my gut when I do that. And, you know, that's...
What reason?
You know, we're teasing it out, but it becomes more complex. Okay. So something that she did, I'm pleased about, so I'll give her a label. She's now a good person in my eyes because so I had to explore it a bit more. What's going on? What if she chose to do something that did not please me?
Bad girl.
Well, is she a bad girl? And so now we had this, is it a dichotomy? We've got someone who can be good and someone who can be bad. I was thinking, how is that possible? How can I make that work in my own thinking? So I eventually got to the point where I realized someone needs to behave the way I want them to behave. I'm not flexible enough to accept that that person has the choice to do the opposite or any other thing. I hope this is coming across as making sense, because it makes sense. It's hard to articulate.
when you're saying I'm not flexible enough, what you're saying, and correct me, is you're running a set of beliefs about the world and about what is right and wrong for you. And they might be your cultural beliefs, might be religious, political, whatever, but they're yours. And they might be shared even by many, but they're still specifically yours. And so she does something which fits with that. And so that means to you that she's good. And so you reflect that she's a good girl. And inversely, if she does something that's not fitting with your beliefs or your structure of reality or whatever, then she's a bad girl.
Yeah. And that's quite a complex proposition, because the relationship can only exist if we do good things.
Well, it can only exist in a way that we want it to exist, but it can exist in another way completely if she repetitively does a whole bunch of stuff that doesn't fit with what you think is right.
Well, if it doesn't, then there's an inclination to sever the relationship.
Well, not if you're a father and a daughter.
Well, not if you're a father.
Generally,
well, if you're a father, then there is far greater effort into making this person good.
Yeah.
And that's the bit that shocked me. I had to explore it quite a bit. I had to go inside into my own thinking quite a lot. What are the consequences of this? I have to make this person someone. And when I realized that, when I could eventually articulate it, it was a shock. Absolutely floored me. If I bring this little person in the world, I've got to make them someone. And I thought, my goodness, what's going on in here? Does that mean I have no choice? Does that mean I have no freedom? Because I can only give what I have. Where's my thinking that I have to make someone someone?
Yeah.
I'll never get anything new from that person if I filter out all the bad stuff. That just means you're bad. We've got to bring you back into line into good. I hope this makes sense.
It does
really
make
find
sense.
It hard to put words to.
I think it does make sense. Just closing the door there. I think it does make sense, and yet when this is the first time you've ever heard it, it may not be clear why it's important.
Yeah.
Because it's just words. I mean, it's just like, well, good girl, bad girl, whatever, she's a girl, she's done something that's good. The query then is, well, has she? And if she's going to grow up, or he or she or it or they are going to grow up in a way that is functional, adaptable, resilient, and fully able, then is this language going to actually help them to do that? Yes. And we can see across the board that actually we can see in all the mental health issues, we can see in all the, people, we can see in all of that the answer is actually generally no. And so and this happened to me, with the placemakers thing, but I was at a school, a playground, and some kid did something, and it was like, the mum grabs the kid's arm and bad girl, and then, the invariable bad boy from the other parent. And it was just like, well, okay, but how do they learn because the added part of this is that the child learns that there is such a thing as being bad.
Yes.
And being good. And so they have to dissociate out of their natural desire to investigate and to almost second person themselves to make sure that they don't do this apparent thing that's bad. And so it's kind of labeling as almost a first baseline, labeling as a child as a first baseline step into dissociating from, or how I know that I'm okay to learn, how to investigate, to fall over, to push someone, those sorts of things.
Yeah.
And is this
Yeah, I love the word investigate.
Well, that's what we're doing
good.
here. And
Yeah.
all due respect, we've been talking about this for how many freaking years?
And yet still challenging to articulate.
It's
So
so challenging because
where you were going, I really liked, because there's the child is learning, and we did. I mean, we were exposed to this when we were children too. Where, what am I free to do? Is learning something that's free to do, or am I constrained to what it is that I'm allowed to learn?
But we still have to step back one from that, because that you've gone slightly advanced again.
Okay, yeah. I'll bring it back.
You're so right. But if I'm growing up as a child and I want to be loved, I need safety. I need
You need to be in a safe place.
need food, need shit like that.
Yeah.
And that's my primal drive.
Mm.
And that is potentially constantly playing with this other drive, which is curiosity to learn and to investigate.
Yeah.
And so if I am learning that there are certain ways that you do stuff that make me potentially receive more love or less, I'm going to move more towards the behaviors that are going to make sure that I get that safety, security, and love that I primarily absolutely require.
Yes.
Right? My brain won't develop, and we know this. My brain won't develop. And that's where we get into that core part.
Yeah.
Is that who am I?
Yeah. So let's reconnect what you just said to the basics. Good girl, bad girl.
Yeah.
So everything you just said comes down to these labels, and these labels can take many forms: good girl, bad girl, smart, beautiful,
Clever,
fat,
ugly, stupid.
Yeah, yeah.
And the interesting thing is, for a child, is that you can be called a good or a bad in minutes apart. You can one day get an A and you're an incredibly clever kid, and then the next day get a D because it's, maths, and you're a stupid idiot.
Yeah.
And so this child has to dissociate from their knowledge, which is, I know I did my best, or I did what I did, behavior, and have to dissociate into needing to be the truth, because I'm getting all of this information from these truth sayers.
Yeah.
The parents, the teachers, the siblings, the whatever it is.
Yeah.
I need their love. I need the safety and security that they bring when I go with them.
Yeah. So you mentioned dissociation. So they, on the one hand, they will try to fit the expectations. On the other hand, there is this very strong drive to discover what they don't know, or explore the things they don't know. So can we talk about learning now, or is it still too early?
Well, what comes to mind, I think, yes, we can. And yet what comes to mind is that also as a child, they don't have the capacity to make clear distinctions.
Yeah.
Generally, and I'm saying generally, but it's not necessarily true at all. And as for adults who have grown up this way, is that we still find it very difficult to make distinctions between someone else's belief about us and what we choose to believe about ourselves. Someone might say, well, you're a failure at this thing, and oh shit, I'm a failure.
Yeah, yeah.
But they're not talking about you. And this is the really important thing. So when that man was talking about Phoebe being a good girl taking the flower, he was not talking about her.
No.
He was talking about something that she did which fitted behaviorally with his shape of the world.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's a fiction that she took the flower.
Yeah, this has been an obsession of mine in the last few months, this idea that this particular gentleman didn't see Phoebe. He saw what he thought she should be.
exactly, yeah,
How,
through her
yeah,
behavior. So
yes.
he had no distinction capacity.
So it's perpetuated. So he's trying to infect Phoebe with his.
Well, yeah, and unconsciously just running the state, what would you call it? I don't know, the line, which is this is what you do socially when this happens. You don't think about what's happening. She's done this. 100 million people you've seen do this. When you were a child, when you did something, you got this. This is what you do.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. And
yeah,
so, so that language perpetuates because that's the language that is current in the culture.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. But if
And
we're sorry,
it can come across in language. It can also come across in non-verbal
yeah,
communication as well. So the fundamental pattern is you are evaluated on what you do.
who's chopping carrots?
Tom's chopping carrots.
Carry on, Sue.
He doesn't know how to do it quietly. He gets a kick out of the noise.
Now for effect.
You know? I don't know, Morse.
So we won't be using this recording, I don't think. We're going to have to find place and time that works better.
Yes.
You're on holiday today. It's a public holiday.
Public holiday. Yeah.
Ah, nice.
Yeah. 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 So the fundamental pattern is that you are the thing you do.
Yeah.
And there is a desire to push you into do more of what I want you to do.
Yes.
And
when you do that, you become good. Okay.
Yes.
You fit.
Yep. So what are the consequences for that child in this particular?
Line them up, baby. Line up those consequences.
Well, you said dissociation.
Yeah.
Can we break that down for people who are probably not familiar with the word? How would you describe some dissociation?
Well, it's interesting because I had this experience just recently where I was in a workshop and I was improv workshop and I'm working with someone and there was this element where I perceived that I had to be good at this thing called improv. And so I was up there and I wasn't present because I was constantly checking, am I acting or not? Am I present or not? Am I paying attention to this person or not? And so because that would mean I didn't use this vernacular myself, but in the general context, it would mean well, for me, it was like, I'm doing this well. So even that had an aspect, because then I'd be a boy, give tics and shit like this. But fundamentally, and then as I was saying earlier, when we had a pre-talk, was I had this moment, what was it, a long, maybe 2 or 3 minutes of improv, which is quite long, where I was sitting next to this person and we were having a dialogue. And for the first time ever, I actually understood what acting is, or to act, which was you're not acting, I'm present fully in the space and with the person. It's completely and utterly relaxed. And having a conversation like you normally would, but there's a group of people watching. The only difference was a group of people watching. And it felt amazing.
Yeah. So you're not commenting on your
no,
because you're in the experience.
And I gave up. I just couldn't give a shit what anyone thought. I just couldn't give a shit. I was saying, where the fuck is this going to go? And that was the end of it. That's how I sat down. I sat down, don't know where this is going to go. And I said, what's going on for you? And that was how it started. And then bam, 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 bam. And there were lots of silent moments, lots of drifting off moments, lots of, and it was just, but what I'm getting at is that Dissociation is where, in that context, or let's say in a family context, I need love, blah, blah, blah. I've got to be good. I've got to be good.
Mm.
And so to be good, I've got to constantly remember what the fuck is good.
Yeah.
Because I don't know what that is, because I've never been taught, or I've never had the opportunity to truly investigate what it feels like to have this thing called feeling good. You know, all I know is I respond when I'm told that I'm good. But what I don't ever hear, and this is the dialogue that we're wanting to go into at some point, is I never hear, you know, Aaron, when you do that, I feel uncomfortable. And I would like you to think about how you're behaving so that next time something new might happen. Yeah? I don't know about you in your childhood, but did you hear that shit? For one thing, there's a paragraph there. It's not good boy or bad boy.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's actually more correct, because who am I trying to be good for? I'm trying to be good for a fiction in my parents' head. It doesn't actually exist. And so I have to dissociate into their world, forget my own, and try to remember and try to figure out, well, what is it I have to do again to be right for them? And that's your first, that's dissociate. I'm not in myself.
So it's an inquiry or a description about what I should be doing or should be attending to, and not being present in myself.
Yes, where we can do our best and most true and most honest experience of learning through whatever, what is actually right for me.
Yes. So there's no learning going on. It's a repetition of what the expectation is. Okay.
And then how many times have we heard ourselves go, oh my God, that was Dad?
Yes.
Yeah, like we're talking to our own kids. I've got a 15-year-old, you've got a 15 and a 18.
16 and 20.
Yep, I was close. So you've found yourself going, oh my God, that was Dad. You know, tonality, body language, but the linguistics as well. Geez. And now what we know also is that what words come out of our mouths become the words that they repeat internally, which stimulates epigenetic response, which is the body shifts its reality, blah, blah, blah. We can talk a lot about that later. But this is important.
Yeah, yeah. That's interesting to say that they actually repeat that. That's a good point.
Yeah, because we do. We repeat internally what we hear. Yeah, and so we're literally giving ourselves an affirmation of what we were told.
Yeah, yeah.
You're a boy, bad boy. Uh-oh, I'm a bad boy. And the whole body suddenly responds genetically to that.
Yeah, it's a reinforcement. Yeah.
Totally. And so it starts to pre-trigger.
Yeah.
Yeah. Get into a lot of other stuff about, the future.
We'll keep it basic for now.
Let's pull it back. So what we're talking about is labeling.
So examples are good girl, bad boy.
Yeah, and we're talking primarily in childhood, aren't we? So good boy, bad boy, silly girl, clever, fat, ugly. And they're usually very binary. That's the other thing. It's not like, oh, what an average girl. I mean, you probably do get that, actually. You're so fucking average. So average. But I was thinking about this the other day because, but as an adult, the interesting thing is like questioning stuff and questioning stuff that has become the global discourse or become the, something, and it could be something like, climate change. And so there are now labels around, I'm a climate change denier, or I'm a climate change, I don't know what it is. What is it? Climate change.
Advocate. Sorry. Climate change advocate, or
or the irony or the paradox of fighting for climate change or fighting to stop climate change. But the challenge with these things is that if what that comes from is if I want to question, if I bring inherent curiosity to this whole thing called the environment is changing, that's not necessarily allowable anymore because there is a global discourse which says politically and everything that, well, there's climate change and it's progenic and it's our fault and we have to reduce carbon. If I bring a challenge to that, I'm a denier.
Yeah, yeah. I didn't know you would. He doesn't know we're recording, so it was my fault.
He's making dinner at 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yeah.
You actually went ahead with it?
We're going to, yeah. But this is a dry run, so I'm letting you off the hook this time.
Well, that was my invitation.
You want to be a part of it?
That'd be fun.
He's studying international studies. International studies?
Relations.
International relations.
Oh my God.
That's sex on a large scale. Let's.
Jesus.
I imagine that was his line.
What was that?
Imagine that was your line. So, the climate change thing is a large topic, but coming back to the idea that it's a label, that you're a denier, which means you haven't fit someone's idea of who you should be.
No.
And it closes down discourse and it closes down investigation. It's exactly the same pattern as good boy or bad girl, or that simple thing. If you're a denier, if I call you a denier, what's that saying about me? Rather than what is it saying about the person who's questioning? So it's saying a lot about me as, straight off the bat, I'm calling you a name.
Yeah.
How does that come into a discourse when you start calling someone a name?
Well, it stops the discourse. All you can have then is a name calling fight.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to dissociate. And this is the problem that I think is actually why I really want to talk more about this, is because I am noticing a huge amount of dissociation that is occurring. And that's why we're not actually hearing, I've got to be careful about this, but not necessarily hearing the whole story about potential, if it is our fault, which I challenge. I don't have any problem with recognizing, as I said earlier, that whole thing around, let's not make it about me, but what I'm saying is that if we challenge, we can't, if we have a label, then we're static. We have a belief, we have a label, and so there's no ecology, ironically, around the conversation, because it's either, it's that classic Bush thing after 9/11. You're either with us or you're against us, and it's like, now go out, America, and make America proud and shop
shopping.
No more. And this is the interesting thing, is to become a consumerist or a consumer, you have to dissociate quite strongly from what you actually need. So
what your true desires are.
Yeah. So most of us are buying things we don't.
You're going into complex land. I like it.
Yeah. Well, it's a dry run, but this is where my.
The thing with climate change, you've got the complexities of climate change itself, but the language, as you pointed out, around it. Now I can label someone, and once again, I'm going to own this because I think it's a curious thing to explore, taking on board. If I do that, if I call you a climate denier, how do I have to do that? And I love what you said. There's a story. There's a story there somewhere, and that's in the individual. But the discourse is all external. There's a whole lot of words, but no one's discovering what's going on in here, in the individual. What are your motivations?
Yeah.
What are your purposes? What's compelling you to use this language?
Well, it's because they feel something really strongly about it. But because we've learned, I'll speak for myself, because I've learned and am still learning how to move out of that way of thinking, because I've learned to externalize how I feel. You know, classic, most soap operas are based on the fact that it's always someone else's fault. The reason why I'm feeling so sad is because he did this or she did that or whatever. It's never anything to do with the fact that I'm the one who's actually feeling sad and I need to do something. And it could be that I'm feeling sad because my perception of the world needs to change. If it was different, then I probably wouldn't feel sad. Yep. But soap operas would die in a day
if they did that.
Had that realization.
Which is a great point. If the world changes, I'll be happier. And if people fall into line, I'll be happier. If they all become good boys and girls...
$1 million. What are the stats? 70 to 80% of them are broke in a year or two. It's like, it's horrific. They're broke in a year or two. There's no money left. You know. So that's the external world is going to make me happy. I'll get more money, blah, blah, blah. And then internally, still nothing happening. I don't know who I am. I don't know what I need.
Yeah. No, we've hit it. We've done, that's it. We've done it. It's if I can control the external, that will change. That's it.
Yeah.
I was trying to look for the pattern.
Of course, that's classic. That comes from. It's called the translation from Sanskrit is mistake of the intellect, and it's a classic problem where there is no differentiation between, in Sanskrit, it's Rishi, Devata, and Chandas, which is the knower, the process of knowing, and the known. And so the knower is the self. The knower is the awareness, the aware person. You know, I'm aware that I'm talking to you right now. The rest of it is process of doing, behavior, yada, yada, and how that comes back. So what we have until the distinction is clear, is we mistake in our intellect that if mum is unhappy and I feel unhappy because of that, then I've made mum unhappy.
Mm.
And that's historically, and so why we apparently learn to meditate and do these different things is so that we can build a distinction so we stop making that fundamental mistake. If you look at the climate thing, it's almost like that is such a grossly manifest example of the self-important, the arrogance of the human psyche knows they're doing something, won't stop it because it feels good to keep doing it, but then notices that this environment is falling apart potentially because of what I'm doing, because I feel so bad about what I'm seeing, it has to be my fault. It just has to be. So the premise is, and it's like building a good hypothesis, okay, what's the thing that is causing this? And we build the hypothesis, we do some research around that hypothesis, we find some research that backs us up from the 60s and the 20s, and we go, fuck, it's that. Fuck, it's our fault. Oh my God. So we ignore the sun, we ignore the planets, we ignore gravity, we ignore the fact that we're flying through space at God knows how many thousands of kilometers a second. We ignore the solar decline. We ignore just the natural rhythms. We ignore the fact that there's been how many ice ages in the last millennia. I mean, we ignore this because we're externalizing our internal pain about what we see going on around us. Because we've only learned to do it that way because we're a good boy or a bad boy. So now we're being good. We're being good because we're going to fix this.
Yeah. I'm sad now that this was a dry run because this is really good stuff. This would have gone down well.
It's still recording. It's still recording. I reckon we go with the carrot chopping and everything. I seriously, man. It's the best. But does that make sense? Does that make sense?
I think there are two aspects to that. I love what you just said. It has to be externalized because that's what we've learned. There's no what tools do we have to go inside and say, well, really, I'm trying to change the world so that I'll be happier, but I don't have the tools to change my internal state.
No, we don't have them, but we do have the tools to know that there's something happened. But even then, remember when you're a kid and Mum says, "Oh, don't cry, or don't feel bad, or don't feel whatever. Here, have a lolly." So you externalize out.
Yeah. That's another. That's not labeling. That's another one of my favorites. Maybe that could be another talk. But don't feel this or don't cry. God, the complexities of that. What on earth were we learning as children?
To not feel. Yeah.
To not feel.
Or to not associate into feeling, but to judge the feeling from what is contextually appropriate, what is okay in my context.
It only has value in certain contexts. In other contexts, what I'm feeling doesn't have value, which is it's fascinating and complex. Could be another one.
We'll just keep doing these to we're, oh man, we can't speak anymore.
But I love where you're going. So this is very simple, apparently. There's very simple communication of something like good boy. Consequentially, can turn into wanting to change the world, wanting to dictate people's behavior. That's how far this pattern can go. Because I don't have the tools.
We're seeing that. Sorry. Yes, we don't have the tools. Sorry, I interrupted.
That's right. We don't have the tools to go, I'm feeling bad about something. Finding out what that feeling wants for me and changing that state first before I then influence the world. So
that's
some basic examples. If I can influence the world through a state of anger. I can be angry and then behave in the world, or I can understand what anger wants, which is, I don't know, whatever it is, let's say satisfaction. And then I can approach the world through satisfaction because I've appreciated what anger has tried to communicate to me. But because of this labeling, which seems really simple and insignificant on the surface, good boy, it turns into this inability to actually choose our emotion and value the emotions that we experience. God, this is getting complex.
Well, pull it back. So if I'm a good boy or a bad boy, and I non-verbally see a response to my behavior, then I am learning non-verbally as well as verbally that that it's bad to emote. Now, what I will do is I'll start to dissociate from emotion.
Yes.
I'll start to dissociate, and then I'll get scared. So what happens later on is I'll get scared of all of this because I know there's a lot of emotion that's been sitting there for a while, and I really needed to say stuff. Or I just needed to, and then we get scared, and that fear, can't have that conversation. What does fear want?
Yeah.
So we get fearful of the fear. We have to dissociate even more because we don't want that either. So that's where you get addiction. That's where you get schizophrenic moments. That's where you get depression and anxiety. Because I don't know what this is. I don't know how to deal with it. I have no strategies, and this is bad.
This is bad. Yeah. I'm ineffectual.
Well, yeah. Well, that would be. Yes, but that's quite. Can you explain that? I'm ineffectual.
I'm ineffectual. I'm feeling all these, and I don't have control of it.
Yeah.
I've got to suppress it. I've got to put it to
Which is another label, rather than saying to myself,
yes,
Christ,
I'm ineffectual.
I don't know what to do. And this is the challenge we have with the English language. Even though there are millions of options to use,
Yeah.
we find ourselves through no fault really, but just through social programming. And I think nature and nurture is that we just fall into this. Oh, this is because I'm whatever, depressed, or this is because, what was the word you just used? This is
I'm ineffectual.
I'm ineffectual.
Yeah.
And so for the watcher, you can't be ineffectual. Ineffectual is a verb. Ineffectualness. You do things that aren't effectual, but it doesn't mean that you're ineffectual. What you're doing is trying to do something.
Yeah.
And this is the beauty of things like, when you watch improv and stuff like that, when they're doing it, they don't care. And when you watch a pre-verbal child, they don't have that. They're just going, fuck, hold on to this and try and get a leg up. Without the words, of course.
No words.
But there isn't like, but if I don't, I'm bad. This shit doesn't exist.
Yeah. That's an excellent point. And my feeling is that we'll probably come back to that a lot in these discussions, that the pre-verbal child is the model that we're working from, is the model that we're comparing to. A pre-verbal child is not holding on to any of this stuff. Whereas an adult, I can't do that, or I can do that, small amounts of that, or I'll be good if I do that, I'll be bad if I do that. And yet there's this real strong, compelling sense that I want to explore the things that I haven't explored, the things I don't know. And that's exactly what a pre-verbal child does.
Yeah.
The world is their oyster. Let me at it. I'm going to go for it. I'm going to touch everything. I'm going to lick everything. I'm going to put it in my mouth. I'm going to... And yeah.
And I guess for the people, for whoever's watching, is that we're not saying that we should return to pre-verbal childhood.
No. What we're saying is that the filters aren't there and we're not constrained. Sorry, that was poor. That was really poor. What I'm saying is that we're aware of filters that we've learned that stop us from being completely and utterly present and allowing ourselves to learn new things. As adults, we're sort of constrained to what we think we can learn. We do a lot of repetition.
Yeah, constrained to what we can learn and what we can just do.
Yeah. We can certainly consider consequences. We can certainly consider the how it would affect others. And still, when we do that, we can still have the choice of whether we go ahead or not. But as a generalization, the definition of adult, which is different to a pre-verbal child, are these constraints that we're unconsciously aware of, not necessarily consciously aware of, and so we try to fit into. Certainly the one about emotions is an example of that. We feel something, we either deny it or call it bad, or find ourselves completely ineffectual with how to deal with it.
Yeah.
We'll drink ourselves to oblivion, we'll take drugs, we will, whatever it is.
The comment that you made a little earlier, which was, the being able, still wanting to be able to make decisions relating to others. How can we do that well when we have no sense actually of what's right for us? We're in a paradoxical situation, because if I've never learned what is actually truly right for me on a really strong, visceral, kind of psycho-spiritual level, let's call it that maybe, then how will I know that I'm right when I'm trying to work out what is the right thing to do when I'm in a community or in a group or in a family? I can't.
I don't know the answer to that.
Well, the answer actually is I can't know. Because if I haven't got that mechanism to know what's right for me, to feel a sense of, the words are so dogged with new age bloody hyperbole, but fundamentally, you know, it's feeling grounded, whatever the fuck it is. But
Yeah.
feeling that there's that center of I get a sense of what's when things are right and when things aren't. If I have had to dissociate out into everyone else's meaning-making world for that knowledge, then I can't actually make a really good decision that will positively influence those around me. And that's what we're seeing on the global scale. I can't.
That's an extraordinary point.
Well, I can't see that anywhere.
You've just blown me away. Just.
Well, think about it. It's just, it makes it, and this is where, you know, when you know, any guru of their worth says, come back to yourself. And that's why they say meditate, not to fucking or bend yourself in half. It's to come back to what is the essential state of being in your own physiological, psychological, spiritual self. What is that like? Not what does it mean? Not are you Godhead? That sort of shit. It's, well, what is it like? Because when you can know what it's like, you have a reference point.
Yeah.
We don't have one in our world. There is no reference point. I've even heard the Dalai Lama label people. The Dalai Lama labels people, oh, she's a pretty woman. I've heard it, quote unquote. It's like, well, no, she's not, Dalai Lama. When I look at this woman, I sense an energy in her which I like. Would be a person of peace way to comment. Not pretty lady. Maybe he was tired. But fundamentally, and so if I'm expecting Greta or the UN, I want to make the decisions that are going to play an important role for the next 10 generations, say, which is how it's working out. I mean, we're still dealing with World War I, for Christ's sake. I mean, people are still lifting unexploded bombs out of their back gardens in England. So we're still dealing with it, let alone the psychology of it.
Yeah.
To even think it's appropriate to go to war is utterly ridiculous. But if those people who make these decisions have no sense of what a true still point place is and how they know a true decision for themselves feels right, you can't have the conversation. It's ridiculous.
This all came from good girl, bad girl.
But that's where it comes from.
That's where this is where it comes from. So this is a very simple idea. Well, apparently, on the surface, this very what looks like a very simple idea of labeling, and it's perpetuated. And hopefully we've explored where the consequences of labeling, and yeah, we haven't explored what an alternative is, but I'd rather not. I'd rather that emerge for people who are interested in.
Yeah,
and looking inside and going, well, what on earth am I doing labeling someone else? Do I label myself?
Yeah. Think about the number, you know, as a closing maybe thought amongst many, is think about what do I think I am during my day? And it can be I am happy, I am sad, I am depressed, I am anxious, I'm a lawyer, I'm a doctor, I'm pathetic. You know, there are so many ways that we dialogue ourselves into a dissociated place.
Yes. What is the internal dialogue that goes into which could be labels?
Yeah.
Not just about experience, but who we think we are in that moment. Yeah. It's an invitation for people to explore this process of thinking.
Yeah. And it's very important to make it clear as that we are, you know.
Yeah. I think that came across. I've had a few surprises in the last few minutes.
I sometimes wish if the weight of, if the amount of mental workout that I'd been doing transferred into my physiology.
Mr. Olympia.
Yeah, I'd be big.
Wow. I did not expect that would go where we went.
No.
Or from label. So yeah, to our observers, an invitation to look at whether you label and whether you label yourself.
Yeah.
Because personally, I catch it all the time. I know I judge, and I acknowledge that. And what I do is I very quickly turn that label into, okay, what was I trying to achieve with that label?
Yeah.
And fundamentally, it's, well, I wanted to either change that person or change the world, my environment, so I'd be better off.
Mm.
But it wasn't about changing me. So I recognize that, and it's.
Well, and you just said something really interesting, which is a whole, Pandora's box, which is, well, I'm going to ask you, Keith,
Yeah.
Can you change you?
It's on my wish list.
Yeah, but okay, so how do you know when you've changed?
Well, this is one of my passions. At this point in time, the only way I know that I've changed, and I don't like the word, not a bad word. Personally, I don't like the word change. I like the word learning. But I'll use the word. The only way I know that I've changed is if I relate to others differently.
So the change that's occurred is that you've become aware that your behavior is different. You're fine. Nothing wrong with you. Yeah, you've got to step it one back. Off the recording, but it's still recording. But so you said change. I want. What was it you said? I want to change, or how do I know I've changed, or whatever?
How do I know that I've changed? That I've noticed a difference in the way I relate to others.
Yeah. So it's where I'm at the moment with all of this. Is it okay? So who's aware that you're behaving differently with others?
Me.
Yeah. Nothing wrong with you. It's because even when you say I am or I want to change, it has to be I want to change this, because
I get you.
Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But once again, it's just so inherent in our language. It's like when I've changed what? Because it's not I can't change myself.
Yeah.
And that's really important because we're constantly being told that we're all buggered, that there's something wrong with us. It's not.
No.
It's what we're doing that tells us that something doesn't work. So we can track that back. I'll say, well, what comes before doing? Thinking. What comes before thinking? Feeling. What about your neurology? Nature and nurture. Fundamental thing is I'm constantly in awareness of who I think I am. But I don't know outside of just have to come back and say, well, right now, and this has been the really fundamentally powerful thing about the meditation and all these different things is coming back constantly to, wait a minute, that's not me, because I'm aware of it. The me, and this is the Rishi Devatachandana, the Rishi is the me, that is going, I am aware of, or I am feeling, or I am. I'm not angry. I'm feeling angry, and I'm aware of that.
Mm.
That's what I want to change.
Mm.
And then
Yeah.
I'll notice
Yeah.
that I feel better because of that, which is also I'm aware of my feelings. It's hard. It's so hard. And when you start talking like people think, well, fuck off. It's too hard.
It's hard. It's impossible. There's so much.
Don't say it's impossible.
But no. I use the word purposefully.
And just write down. Don't say it's impossible. Don't.
No. We'll get to negation another time.
Yeah.
No, it's impossible. I think I use it purposefully. It's okay to acknowledge that it's impossible at a level. And we'd have to get into logical levels in NLP, but at a level, I accept that it's impossible. Humanity as a whole is incredibly complex, and so if I accept that it's impossible to make the world a certain way, then what I know is I can be aware of the things that I'm doing. Improve what I do. Fundamentally improve the way I learn. You know, people are at each other, whether they call each other climate deniers or whether they say you're in the wrong religion, or you've got the wrong spirituality or the wrong philosophy, or you've got the wrong attitude about something. Yeah, people are at each other. I just think,
you wear the wrong clothing.
Yeah, you wear the wrong clothing. Goodness, you're the wrong color. It's impossible.
Mm.
Am I willing to look at myself? Am I willing to get excited that I could start to learn again? The world's going to do what they're going to do. This is an invitation to people who get an excitement about, yes, it's impossible. What's possible, though, is I can start to learn again. Because all this good boy, bad boy shit encouraged me to stop learning in profound ways.
Yeah.
So that's why I use the word impossible, right? There's an excitement about that. Mm. And it's impossible. How do I get out? That's it. I find that exciting. It'd be lovely to have people getting this conversation and wanting to be a part of the conversation, because one of my passions is that we create each other. I love that expression. For better or for worse, both. We can encourage someone to inhibit themselves. We can encourage someone to be free. But I only give what I have. So I just get excited about that. Because I'm making mistakes all the time, which is really bloody frustrating. Hopefully I'll learn from them one day.
Yeah.
But I like what you said. I'm not fully there yet with this idea that I am, and it's not wrong. It's not bad. It's not anything. It just is. And it has the capacity to learn. So we've destroyed the idea of the label.
Well, I think, I am comes from, a very old, possibly not necessarily true, but a very interesting way of looking at how we are. And some of them have said, that there is only I am. And then everything that follows is, I am this, I'm that, I'm na, is an extension, or is that, the beginning or the manifestation of that mistake that we become more and more addicted to thinking is who we are. Whereas in the actual, original moment, it's just, well, I am and then here, I guess, or aware.
Mm. Mm.
If there's maybe a noun, which is also a verb, I guess, is like, I am awareness.
Yeah, well, language is always after the fact, so we're trying to put words to something that doesn't have words.
Yeah,
So,
and yet the child, I guess, before all of this drama occurs, the child is in that quite strongly on a very physical and many say spiritual and mental level of, well, I am, and that's all there is. There's no other dialogue. It's just I am, and what's over there.
Yeah.
Or what's that feeling, whatever. But there's not and even to the point where it's not a judgment about it. So it's not like it's just, oh.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
Oh. And then someone labels it. And we have that in clowning. We have that in clowning. We walk into a room of a patient in clown doctoring. We walk into a room and, we might just look at the drip and just go, oh. And suddenly, whoever's in the room, usually a patient, but probably a family member, they will just look at it because they've never seen it like that before. And you're allowed to touch certain things. So, you touch it and you just, and in honesty of being in clown, I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
I have no idea what this thing is. And that's, and that's valuable. And it's really impossible to label or rule make or whatever when you're in that. So, I mean, ironic, kind of paradoxically, we're running a very strict number of very specific rules working in that environment, but we know them very well, and they're there. But and so as a child, the child can't stand you. That's a rule. So it's working in that environment.
Yeah.
So interesting.
It is. The fact that it ends up in the world that we experience today, I just find that intriguing. There can be so much that's externalized, and yet, where's the invitation? Where's the where's the sense that exploring myself might actually be a good idea, might actually pay dividends?
Well, I think that's growing, but there is, I think there's historically always been, whether it's a shaman, a witch doctor, a guru or whatever, there's always been someone who's saying, have you thought about going inside for a while? It's like, just maybe chill out and just go inside. Stop killing things. Maybe
That's right. Instead of punching or shooting that person, maybe
sit over there and close your eyes for a while. But I think once again, because the language is the way we explore it through language dictates the path. And so religion is a wonderful idea, a wonderful way of explaining that in a sense of how you get a guru. I mean, there's no such thing as a guru. There's no such thing as an enlightened person. There are just people who behave in ways that are uniquely different and somehow really compelling to those who don't fully understand it and want to learn it. There's no such thing as it. They're possibly useful labels.
Yes. Yeah.
To a point, but until
a label.
until I dissociate out into and become a fanatic or whatever it is that follows that guru to the T, and then I have no sense of what self is. But that happens in politics, it happens in religion, it happens in all that sort of stuff. But once again, I think, I'll go back to that original comment. If I have no sense of self, then it's no surprise that I don't know, and I won't know. I won't be able to recognize a strategy because I'm not there.
Yeah.
And so that's the real challenge, unless it's
there's a sense of who we should be.
well, no, I don't think that I don't. Yeah, but see, that's shooting on ourselves, and
Absolutely, it is shooting on ourselves.
because we are, if we want to use should, we are who we should be right now. It's just there are a lot of us going, this doesn't feel right. But the cautionary factor to that feeling is that we are feeling through a bunch of filters that aren't actually ours. Programmed cultural, political, financial, religious filters.
And even before that, can I trust my feelings? Am I feeling wrong? So,
well, because if you express your feelings, you're a weirdo, or you're a sap, or you're a pussy, or you're just wrong. Get a grip.
Get a grip. Yeah.
Take some drugs, man. It's good for you. And that's the real challenge. And that's why having this conversation and bringing it always back to the real simple thing, which is how am I, as you said it really beautifully, how am I labeling myself? And how does that influence how I label others and my world? And how much of that is actually something that I've truly felt to be true? And when isn't it? You know, if I'm about to tell my daughter off and say she's da-da-da-da-da, do I honestly believe that, or am I replicating something? What do I really feel? Well, I feel incredible compassion for my daughter because she has to deal with an adult who's been programmed for 50 odd years.
I love that.
You know, and it's like, oh my God, I don't want to. I have sometimes I don't even want to open my mouth. What diabolical thing is going to suddenly come out of my gob?
Yes. I know that one. I like that. Yeah. Am I labeling myself? Because that's basic. It's basic stuff, isn't it? If I can label someone else, that means I'm also labeling myself.
And once again, that's the mistake. That's the externalizing. That's the, as they say in psychodramatic, you know, that's the projection, whatever you want to call it. But that's where I don't understand how this works. I'm feeling this. It must be something to do with what's out there.
Yes.
I mean, Facebook, Instagram, it's just dripping with it. You know, YouTube is dripping with it. It's just, it's all because, you know, politics. Well, if we just had a different bloody political system, you know, never worked. Well, what do you want?
That's an externality. That's externalizing. That's
Well, let's look around the world and let's look at socialism. Let's look at, you know, communism. Let's look at any ism, a label. And the thing that we'll talk about more and more later is sorry?
It'll work if we choose another ism.
It always works. And then and then you get into the subsets of political, you know, the feminism, the masculism, the whatever you know, all the racism, all these different isms, and how those labels remove flexibility and adaptation.
Yeah.
You know, I've often wondered. No,
go finish.
No, please.
Finish it all.
No.
No, I just want to continually bring it back to the well, it's a question, it's an invitation. Do you want to look at whether you ever label anyone or whether you ever label yourself? Has our discussion here, you know, piqued your interest in terms of am I even aware that I label other people? Do I call people ugly? Do I call them stupid or smart? Do I call them worthless? Do I call them lazy?
And how do I label myself?
Yeah.
You know, even
well,
things that
fun. Yeah.
you know, lazy, fat,
do you
ugly.
want to go there? Do you want to go there? Do you want to become aware of whether there's this internal dialogue of, you know, labeling yourself? That's fascinating. It's an invitation.
just hearing those birds in your background, and I'm thinking, birds don't label themselves. Wake up in the morning, well, then I know, they just wake up in the morning, have a sing-song, find some food. I wonder, you can imagine a bird getting down on the ground and going, "Now stay still, wormy. Good boy."
Good boy.
What a good one. What a good worm.
What a good worm.
Stay still.
Yeah. Oh.
When the baby bird falls out of the nest, you stupid ass.
You're no son of mine.
Yeah.
It's an incredible complexity, and it can often drain. But if we can bring it back to something simple, I love that. Do I label myself? I love that. Am I interested in discovering whether I label myself? And how does that affect how I relate to others?
And then the strategy would be, okay, so if I'm calling myself lazy, what am I actually talking about? What does that
No, why are you putting the effort into calling yourself that?
Yeah. Because actually, ironically, it takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of effort. I'm exhausted from calling myself lazy. I need to lie down. It's like, well, okay, so what behavior am I talking about? Because it's not who you are, it's the behavior that you're seeing. It's the behavior, not necessarily even it's behavior you're doing, but it might not even be, you might not even own it, you might have learned it, or you might.
Could you please apply that to I'm ugly or worthless or not valuable?
So if I'm saying I'm ugly, so it could be a number of things. First is I've been told I'm ugly. So from that point of view, I'm going to go, okay, so who told me that? It might be a group, or it might be one person specifically. Okay, so what are they talking about when they call me ugly? They're talking about their personal perception of me. Now, from our conversation, what do we know about personal perception at the moment? It's all projection.
Yeah.
So I'm feeling ugly, everything around me is ugly, and you're getting the brunt of it. So the way to think about it, if you're being called ugly, is it's a person who has their own belief about how you look, but not a language to actually express how they feel about how you look. So they just label you. Lazy language. The second one, I am lazy because I just feel that way. There you go. I feel ugly. That means it's a feeling. So the feeling is what? Oh, I feel sad. I feel uncomfortable. I feel dirty. I actually don't like the fact that I've got acne. I don't like my clothing. I don't like da-da-da-da-da. It'll never be who you are. It'll be a judgment about something that you're doing, seeing, hearing, feeling, or wearing. Or it could be the fact that as we saw when we were overseas, it's like, you could be living on the fucking street. And it makes you feel ugly. But it's the context, it's not actually who you are, because people have pulled themselves out of that stuff.
Yeah.
But it's more about saying, okay, I'm not a label. What am I actually trying to say? And that's where we've got to pull away from the lazy, drop down into, well, what's happening in my gut, what's happening in my heart, what's happening in my thinking actually, before I just drop into lazy label. What am I actually thinking about? What am I feeling? What am I seeing? What am I hearing?
Yeah.
And that's where the pre-verbal child is so powerful, because the pre-verbal child is totally awareness, nothing else. And it's like, but lazy labeling, it's all sorted. I'm lazy.
Yeah.
I don't have to be aware of anything. I suck. I'm lazy. All over. And then we'll project it out, because if I'm feeling lazy, My world is lazy. Other people are lazy.
That's going to happen anyway.
And then it'll self-perpetuate. And if we understand that rhythm or process, that's really useful as well. How many people have we known? Why do I keep attracting the same people into my life? Because I'm running the same dialogue internally.
Yeah. So what are you saying? Acknowledge your feelings. Feelings are good. Your feelings are okay.
No, but what's it good again? Okay. It's like
your feelings are your feelings.
They are. But it's like, okay, it's not that it's good or bad or evil, because some people don't like the way their feelings feel. I mean, I've been there, you've been there. Some of these feelings suck. They feel really uncomfortable. And that dialogue helps. It's like, but it might not be feelings, it might be I'm thinking really weird thoughts about myself, And okay, so what are those thoughts? What's been happening that you think might be influencing those thoughts? But they are thoughts, and the fact that you're aware that you're having thoughts means that you're not those thoughts.
Yeah.
If you're aware that you're having these feelings, then that kind of means that you're not those feelings, because you're aware that you're having them, which means that's after the fact. Even when we're in the middle, and I've had this in the last 2 months ago, I told you about this, that my first ever massive anxiety attack. I had an anxiety attack, and I've never had one of these things before, and very low state of health, very low state. I was doing a detox. I was in a confined space in a pressure room thing, but I just suddenly went and I thought, wow, this is far out. And so I brought on, the curiosity around it. I think, wow, and then I realized there were some strategies that this wasn't me, that I was okay, and yet I was in a confined space. So I was thinking, okay, well, what can I do to kind of help myself with this? So I knocked on the panel. So I made sure there was someone who could let me out if it was really necessary. Good call, rational. But my first place was I was fascinated by the immediacy of it, how it came on, and then I thought to myself, but this is not who I am, because I'm aware that I'm feeling this way. There's a very fine line between that, because it was pretty overwhelming.
Yeah, I did.
But then with that comes, okay, so there's this behavioral. For some reason, my psychosomatics has just reacted to this confined space, which makes sense. It's a confined space.
Yeah.
Blah, 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 blah. But so you can do it if you're in a difficult situation where it's coming on quick. It's feeling, or it's thoughts, or it's a sensation that's suddenly happening.
Yeah.
But it's not who I am. And this is the real important distinction, because then we can take some directive. We can have choices.
Yeah.
And that's all essentially it's all the gurus or all these people who talk about blah 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 are talking about. This is you just have a lot more choices available to you.
Yeah.
And you don't when you're labeling. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, that's been great, Keith. Thanks very much. Checks on the mail. Sleep on that. We'll be back at it tomorrow.
I'm pleasantly surprised at where we went.
Yeah, it was supposed to be, just so everyone knows, it was supposed to be 15 minutes.
Yes. How can you do labeling in 15 minutes? We could have. But...
Well, I think what it would come down to is like, what is it? What's the problem that it creates? What's a potential solution? And I think that harks back to the start. A potential solution for all of this is just recognize that it's happening.
It's happening, yeah.
And recognize that whether you fully understand it or not, it's very detrimental to your psychophysiological health. And potentially your ability to have really, really good relationships with people.
Yeah.
And most importantly with yourself. And I think, but labels, just recognize them. And they're everywhere.
Yeah. That's the first step. Recognize them. The awareness is the first step. Yeah.
Yep. And then when you've got them, you'll know you're being a good boy.
You'll be good when you're recognised. We've done well.
Okay. 3, 2, 1. Stopping recording.
Oh.